It's time to get started, so let's do that.
A little louder.
All right, welcome to the Spirit of Life services for, February 10th, 2015. I'm Dr. Doug Kelley. Good to have everybody with us here in the live audience as well as in the broadcast audience. Glad you could join us tonight. And to those of you who are watching the archive too, we don't want to forget you. We've got on the program tonight, my part is going to be standing in the shadow of your full potential. We'll talk about that first up, and then Dr. Hunter is going to talk about the topic of accessing your higher self with inner oracle cards, with the ones that we have, which are these right here, and she'll talk more about those, and I'll explain too later. Then we've got Grant Rubendunst with us, visiting speaker, of course, and he's going to be talking on time slips, which is a rather interesting topic. So that's what's coming up for the program tonight. As always, let's begin with our 9 principles of belief. Number 1, as sentient and evolving human beings, we not only believe in practicing and living by the principle do no harm, but also in the principle of do right, thus enhancing the vibrational level of humanity. We believe in the indomitable power of the human spirit to ultimately triumph in the face of any dilemma. The answers we seek already exist within us. We invoke and exert the counselor and guru within. Number 3, we believe that we alone are responsible for and capable of solving human social problems, and believe the roots of those solutions lie in exploring, understanding, and empowering the human condition. Number 4, we embrace the differences that make all human beings unique, recognizing that we all come from star material and are therefore equal, irrespective of heritage, beliefs, gender, or gender preference. One planet, one race, one ancestry, one destiny. Number 5, rather than a supreme being, we recognize and honor the divine energy that exists in all living things. Number 6, we believe that the nature of a human being encompasses both a physical and spiritual aspect, and that human consciousness survives the death of the physical body in a coherent fashion. Thus, death opens a new chapter of life and conducts the individual into a higher state of existence. Number 7, we believe in self-acceptance, self-responsibility, and respect for free will, and that these 3 synergistically create the goal of self-completeness. Number 8, we believe in the value of practical education in metaphysics, metapsychology, and life skills as a means of empowering the human spirit and enhancing the human condition. We maintain an open but grounded mind to potential realities as yet undescribed by science. And number 9, we believe that discovering the true nature of consciousness and human existentialism will ultimately have a positive impact on human evolution and peaceful coexistence. And for more information on these 9 principles of belief, please visit metaphysicalhumanism.org. All right, for our first segment, which is empowering the spirit, I'm going to talk about standing in the shadow of your full potential. That's the topic. And before I start this discussion, get in mind something that maybe you want to do, you want to accomplish. You've been wanting to do it, you've been wanting to accomplish it, but you just haven't for one reason or another. Maybe it's been something you've wanted to do for a long, long time. Maybe it's just a recent thing, but you're not doing it. So whatever that is for you, get that in mind, and keep that in mind as we go through this discussion. A few months ago, one of my students, Dr. John Jang, graduated recently from UK, made a comment in one of his assignments about standing in the shadow of your full potential. And I thought that was a great comment. Of course, it was a takeoff from a quote that was discussed in that particular segment that was made by my father, my late father, F. Richard Kelley. And I didn't see this quote until after he had passed. And I was going through his papers, and he had a file, you know, he kept a big file of quotes and thoughts and things, and a lot of it was things he'd written. There was this little yellow piece of paper, it looked like it came from one of those legal pads, you know. And scribbled on the words, or scribbled on the face of that little scrap of paper, were the words, "We ought not live in the shadow of our worst moments." Think about that for a minute. And I read that and I thought, wow, where'd that come from? You know, we ought not live in the shadow of our worst moments. I did a search. I can't find it anywhere, and so I have no other choice than to attribute it to him. But it fit him so well because he was that kind of person, and he had some worst moments. And I can just see through his eyes, you know, it comes to a point when you get so tired of beating yourself up for one thing or another, right? So we ought not live in the shadow of our worst moments. Well, that's what my student, Dr. Jane, was referencing when he said we also should stand in the shadow of our full potential. And I want to, I forgot to mute my computer, and I want to expand on that a little bit. One of the biggest reasons that we stand in our own way is due to fear, right?
Yes.
Fear of this, fear of that, fear of, and you know, fears are irrational in nature for most of the time, and they're based on our real, not real, right? Zig Ziglar put it well. He said, fear, F-E-A-R, stands for false evidence appearing real. And isn't that really the case? So often when we do get past that fear, we realize that was just false evidence appearing real. It looked real. It looked like it was the real deal, but it wasn't. It was just in our mind, in our imaginations. So our fears are irrational. Why do we have these fears? Well, if we boil it down some more, or we take that onion and peel layers away, we can get to the core. The core is we have a fear. We fear things because we fear losing control. We may not know how to deal with something. It's the same reason why a lot of people don't like change, because they fear losing control. That's right at the core of it. And so as we think about that thing that we would like to do but haven't done, what are our fears? Are they false evidence appearing real? Is it just an irrational, emotional thing? And most of the time, yes, it is. What would you do if you knew that you couldn't fail? Think about that one for a minute. If we knew we could not fail, boy, we'd do everything, wouldn't we? We'd do tons of things if we just knew we wouldn't fail. The interesting thing is that even if we try it and we fail, it's really not a failure. It's a learning opportunity, isn't it? I mean, anybody who's ever done anything in life has failed one time or another, and sometimes many times. That just goes with the territory. You want to do something, you're risking, right? You're putting yourself out there. You're taking a risk. Obviously, our risks need to be a calculated risk, but they can't be so calculated that we end up never doing it. What I'd like to do is talk about some experiences from my own life experiences to kind of support and underscore this point that I'm making about fear, feeling the fear and doing it anyway. I think it was Susan Jeffries wrote a book on that topic. When I look back over my life, I remember back when I was about 16 years old. I was like 8 years ago. Do you believe that? I wouldn't. That's a total lie right there. I was 16. I met my mentor of those years. His name was Sal Balderrama. And Sal lives up here in Sarasota now. I've known him for 40 years. And I met him, and he owned a little taco place. In fact, it was called the Taco Place, you know. He had bought it, and he was running it, and I went to work for him. It was a fast food taco place, much like Taco Bell or Taco John's, for those of you who have those. And so I worked for him, quickly became assistant manager, and we became very good friends, and he really was a mentor. Now, he was 11 years older than me. That meant he was 27. And here he was running his own business, and I look back at 27 now, as maybe you do if you're past 27, you think, wow, he was just a kid, so to speak, compared to me now. But Sal was an amazing, and is an amazing person. He obviously was very confident. He knew what he would. He knew who he was, and he knew why he was who he was. He was actually a former pro ball player with the Kansas City Royals. And after he left that, he went on and did this for his business. And that's where I met him and worked for him. And we worked together for several years. And Sal became a mentor to me. And when I looked at Sal, I mean, it's like everything he touched turned to gold almost. He just had a way. He was charismatic. Everybody loved him and do. He just has a way about him. But everything about Sal is driven. He's got this forward bent. His direction is forward. And when he walks with purpose. He knows where he's going. That's just what you pick up from Sal. I learned so much from him as a 16-year-old kid with a chip on my shoulder at the time, and it was a pretty big one. And he softened that chip, and it helped to fall away. That's Sal. Later, after that, the taco place thing in Denver, Sal moved back to California, where he was from, Northern California, and he wanted to start another business. So he looked around, decided he wanted to start a landscaping business. So you know what he did? He got his lawnmower and he went house to house looking for lawns to mow. He went to the library and studied incessantly about plants, trees, landscaping things, what would work in his local climate and all that, and he educated himself. He made it happen, and he built a landscaping business that blossomed. I mean, it became a $1 million a year business for him. All from that, because he knew he wasn't afraid. He didn't, gee, what am I going to do for a living? How am I going to put food on the table? He went out and made it happen. That's Sal. And that's been his whole life. And that's what I learned from. And so now as I got older, I remember in my early 20s, I got a degree in electronics, and I went and worked for an office equipment dealer, you know, fixing copiers and other electronic equipment. I did that for about 7 years, and I was really good at it. I needed something new. I needed a change. So I went into sales and did pretty good at that for a couple of years, and then I needed something new. I needed to do my own thing, because that's just the direction I was going. Now, in my mind at the time, think about this. I was just a tech. I wasn't an owner, which they call dealer principals, or I was just a salesperson. I'd gone to the trade shows, the conventions, and I was in classes that they have there with other dealer principals, the owners, the big boys, right? So when it came time for me to think about starting my own business, my own office equipment dealership, it was a bit scary for where I was, because I had never done anything like that. And I had my fears. What if it fails? What if I can't make it work? The thing is that I didn't know I couldn't do it. So I went and did it. Was it hard? Yeah, about the hardest thing I've ever done. But I learned so much. And I'm proud of myself for not backing off, for not saying no. Even if it had gone down the drain, fine, let's figure out a different way, approach it again. That was just what I had learned. And so I did that. I built that company, had it for 6 years, sold it, and moved to Florida about 18 years ago. All right, now let's fast forward up to about 5 years ago. I had been learning all these things. I'd been speaking around the country for 5 years, Puerto Rico, teaching leadership, communication skills, assertive communication skills. I had all kinds of different individuals in my classes, school superintendents, law enforcement, tons of them, and just managers and leaders from business. And I was able to develop a lot of the concepts that you are hearing from this platform now. Well, about 5 years ago, I decided that everything I was doing had to do with consciousness and existence. It's just who I was, everything I was doing. I had started Paranexus, an anomalous research association, back in 2008, along with a colleague. And I had done that, and now it was time to take it to the next level. So I started a church, the one that you know of, now called the International Church of Metaphysical Humanism. Started out as Metaphysical Church of Humanistic Science. Both are mouthfuls, yes, I know. But we got to name it something. So I started that with the idea of doing schools, especially to offer bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees. And I looked at all the stuff that you had to do. Is it legal? Why would people think this is just a diploma mill? What makes anything different than a diploma mill? On and on and on. And I went to work. And I researched, and I found all the information I needed to find. I thought about it. I started building my curriculum. I started writing courses. We have about 30 courses that we offer in our program. And over 20 of those are mine. 22 or 23 of those are the ones I wrote. And I spent a year and a half writing courses, about 80 hours a week, taking everything I'd learned and putting them into courses. And here's the thing, and there's so much that goes into this. This church, this physical place, is one part of it that decided to do. But the websites, the legalities, the corporation, all of that, I didn't hold back. There were times when I really wondered what in the heck I was doing, and would this even work? Would anybody even care? Would anybody want it? Well, it's worked out very nicely. We've got hundreds of students around the world, hundreds of church members around the world. So obviously we're hitting a chord somewhere with a lot of people, and it needs to get bigger. So, if I can do it, can you do it? Yes. Say yes. Of course you can. If I can do it, so can you. A lot of times we just don't realize that we need more information, we need more data. So we go and we do our research, we go online, we look up things, we go to the library if that's what you need to do. You find out. You find a way to make it happen. Because we don't want to be at the end of our days on our deathbed with a bad case of the woulda, coulda, shouldas, the if onlys, and the might have beens, right? When we look back on those tough times, those adversity times, and we're living them, we thought, I don't know what I'm going to do. But when we look back on those, we're going to realize, you know what? That wasn't nearly as huge as I thought it was at the time. In retrospect, we got by it. We got past it. So now, you bring this all back home. What is it that you want to be doing but are not doing? Big question is, how hard can it be? How hard can it be? I've mentioned this too from the platform. I have people now and then who will tell me, well, that's too hard. They want to do something. Well, I say, well, how about this? Well, that's too hard. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear how hard it is. Don't talk to me about how hard it is, because I've lived it. I want to know all the reasons why you can succeed. That's what I want to know. Don't tell me all the reasons why you can't. Tell me all the reasons why you can. That's what's important. I don't know if you've ever seen that Bob Newhart skit that was from Mad TV several years ago. It's called Stop It. If you haven't, you should look up on YouTube. Just do a search for Bob Newhart, Stop It, and you'll find it. It's a funny little skit, but it makes so much sense. And it's a skit where a gal comes into him as a therapist and wants some help. She's afraid of being buried alive in a box. So, they're trying to make a funny thing out of it. And it is funny, but it's got an underlying powerful message. And so he tells her, I've got 2 words I want you to remember, and this will cure everything. She says, okay. He says, you ready? She says, yes. He says, stop it! Think about that for a minute. At times, we get so overloaded with the emotion. Oh, what am I going to do about this? What am I going to do? If I could just do this, if I was just smarter, if I was just more educated. We need to just stop that stinking thinking, as Ziegler would say. We need to stop it. Now, I'm not obviously talking about people with, with some mental stuff going on that they need some professional help with. I'm talking about otherwise healthy people who just have the stinking thinking going on. And as Ziegler says, they need to check up from the neck up, right? That's what I'm talking about. So all that stuff you've been telling yourself of why you can't do it, stop that. Tell yourself all the reasons why you can do it. Bring your unique blend of talents together and make it happen. Because if not now, when? If not now, when? You don't want to get to the end of your days with a bad case of the woulda, coulda, shouldas, the if onlys, and the might have beens. Go out and make it happen, because it's okay. Everybody's afraid. The people who are out there doing all this stuff, Facebooks and Googles and Microsoft, they were all afraid at one point. They did it. Anything you see out there that's a big company now, they were afraid at one point. Some of them are still afraid, depending on how things go. But they do it anyway. And that's the message. So, Don't stand in the shadow of your full potential, because if you don't do it, what you want to do, who will? If you always stand in your own shadow, nothing good will come of that. So go out and make it happen. I love that phrase from Eleanor Sullivan Smith, an aviatrix from the early 1900s. She just passed a few years ago. She wrote a book, The Aviatrix. And in that book she writes, don't let life happen to you. Go out and happen to life. It's a great quote. I talked with her a few years ago, back in 2000. I was writing my first book, and I called her and talked to her and had a nice conversation with her. I always loved that quote. Go out and happen to life, and I've used it ever since. Go out and happen to life. You got something you want to do? Go out and happen to it. Make it yours. It's okay. Give yourself permission to do that. All right. Don't stand in your own shadow. Remember, thank you. I'll take that.
Excellent message.
Thank you, Karen. We ought not live in the shadow of our worst moments. Don't forget that. All right, next segment. Next week I'm going to be talking on the nature of divine energy. You know, there's a lot of different ideas about what's divine energy, what's God, what's this, what's source, you know, whatever. So I'm going to talk about that from a metaphysical humanism point of view. So that will be next week. Next up on the program is Dr. Vicki Hunter, and her topic tonight is accessing your higher self with inner oracle cards. And I have a deck here, and I've got a deck spread out over here on a table for those of you in the live audience, and I'll talk more about those in a little bit when we do the announcements. So, Dr. Hunter.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you. Today I want to talk about, it's all actually in keeping with the conversation that's happening here. Sometimes we just need some ideas, lots of different ideas. And where do we get those ideas? Well, sometimes we consult cards, tarot cards, angel cards, all kinds of cards to get different ideas. Very often they're ideas about higher self or some other altered way of thinking. What's the meaning of life? What's my purpose? What's my sense of being? What decision do I make? Okay, I have a dilemma, so where do I go from here? Because I think what we're all doing is looking for options. We're looking for options to solutions, and taking the next step, and whatever that step may be. Along the journey of IMHS and working with Dr. Kelley, I don't even know who came up with what first, but because one of my fortes is tarot, we were talking about all the different forms of, we call them divination actually loosely, but different kinds of tools that we do use to access our unconscious, subconscious, and superconsciousness. So we thought, why not take the material from the school and the life leadership program and all these wonderful little gems that are throughout all the writings, and put them into our own cards, which really, as the process came, there was this strike of brilliance, because I love them. That's why I say they're a stroke of brilliance. Not just because of the nature of the cards, but because the way we utilize them and what little words trigger for what I call like life skills, like in the practical application of life. So it's kind of a merging of higher thought, inner thought, consulting that inner oracle, if you will, to daily life. And that's what I find is so brilliant. Very often things like the Viking runes or the I Ching leaves you to that very subjective, vague kind of, oh, I think I know what that means. But these particular cards that we're going to talk about here are a little more specific, and that's what I enjoy about them so much. The box of cards that Dr. Kelley was showing you, the Inner Oracle Discovery cards, also have this wonderful little booklet, and of all this wonderful deck of cards, there are 5 suits: existential, spirituality, service, which is of self and to others, and life skills, but also the life leadership paragon. There's another few cards at the end where it's actually at the end, but it can be obviously spread out anywhere. It's the wild cards. There's 9 of them. So with these, I believe that's 54. We have 54 cards, and they're just, like I say, and very beautiful. I know you can't see them here, but anybody who's watching this in the archives, you know, you can go on to the website and see them there. And by the way, if you go on the website, a little card will come up at random. I like to go on every day and say, what's that card going to tell me today? It's like a little thought, provokes my thought, which is what people can do every day for themselves if you draw a card. So I'm just going to give you just an example. Rather than pulling a card, I'm just going to randomly open the book, because essentially that's the same thing. Randomly open the book. There's 4 of them on here. So what's the first one that I look at? That might be a little bit of a message to me, and I'm going to read Pay It Forward. The way they're written is very specific to giving a message not only to the higher self, but what I call that grounding, sensible, practical application. So living with gratitude and responsibility extends generosity to others. Well, that makes sense. And again, tapping into that humanity of us, that spirituality of us, but actually an activity that we can do. Even with random acts of kindness that offer no self-benefit except the satisfaction of heartfelt kindness, this may be a time to calm the spirit and lift the heart by giving forward without any particular reason, reminding yourself that love is the center of all life. Is there a way you can pay it forward right now? And that just gives an example of how these particular cards are written. Now, different layouts, of course, you know, just pick out one card isn't going to give you all your answers, for instance, but there's all kinds of layouts. Not just hold this up here. There's 3 card spreads. You know, there's several that are laid out in this little booklet. But the one brilliant one that Dr. Kelley came up with, and because give credit where it's due, is in keeping with the Life Leadership Paragon, and it's the triquetra. I always have trouble saying that word, triquetra spread. So it's all the points of a triangle and the center. So it would be these, first of all, you have the current situation, then you have self-acceptance. So you might ask yourself, is there something here I need to accept about myself or accepting of a situation? The third would be respect for free will. Okay, am I respecting my own free will? Am I respecting other people's free will? The fourth one, self-responsibility. Okay, well, there's acceptance, free will, but there is a responsibility here. So then to the fifth position back in the center is self-completeness. So there may be a situation that I would like to consult these cards about, to tap into my unconscious mind, that higher consciousness, and bring it down into a very sensible kind of thought-provoking way. So when we put that all together, there's a little story. So it's talking to me, actually I'm talking to myself, higher self to myself, but I'm feeling like the cards are talking to me, but it's always the higher self. But there's a little message. And so I think what we find these different kinds of tools and different kinds of ways to add to our dimension of self. It's kind of what I like to say. It's adding a new dimension. Of course, there's a 3-card spread. There's the past, present, future. I prefer the one that's the situation as it is, the energy unfolding, and then the potential outcome. When we're looking at outcomes, we really do need to see that it's only one possibility of outcomes. Because if I make a different decision today, that's obviously going to change the course of action and the outcome. But if I just let things go as they are, okay, here's the energy of a situation, and I'm communicating at different levels of myself, and if I just let it go, this is likely what's going to happen. So there's an energetic side to it, but there's also a practical side to it. I mean, cause and effect. And I think if we're sensible that there's a cause and effect, action, reaction, put your hand in a hot stove, you burn yourself. It's pretty simple. So a lot of things it does, I think, it gets us better in touch with, in my specialty, which is natural law. And that's what, I mean, that's really my flagship work is what is natural within us rather than how we're conditioned to think. So what I do love about these inner oracle cards is that, again, in my view and how I translate it, is a lot of deprogramming. And the deprogramming is to get right back into who I really am, more about what really is in a natural energy, a natural flow of energy that might happen. Certainly you can use any kinds of cards. There's some really brilliant ones. There's literally hundreds now that people have been developing their own, and I think it's brilliant. A lot of things resonate with me and a lot of things don't. I, have my few favorites, and there's a lot of things on the internet. You will obviously find your own ways and vehicles that help you expand your thinking and looking at different options for solutions for yourself. But really, this is, in my opinion, a really big stroke of genius, because they're really lovely, lovely cards. Not only are they beautiful, but it's the way they speak to us. So I strongly recommend, of course, I'm going to do a little sales pitch here and tell everybody you can buy your own deck online. And of course, if you're there at the center, you can. There are cards there you can pick up. Now, as you're coming and going through the center, I know Dr. Kelley's placing a deck of cards on the counter. You can just go by and flip one over and read the book, and maybe there's a little message to you. And that's pretty much all I have to say on, the inner oracle cards. Really, they're a beautiful self-discovery tool. So I highly recommend them.
Thank you, Dr. Hunter. Any questions from anyone?
Does she use a real deck of tarot, a different deck of tarot cards also?
Do you use a different deck of tarot cards also?
I use the Rider-Waite tarot. That's my favorite. I have used others, but that was the first deck that was ever given to me, and back in 1976. So I think it just is my best tool. I like them. You know what else I love is the Pamela Coleman Smith story, the woman who actually painted the pictures, and she was an extraordinary artist, and I think she had a really good feel for different symbols and how they go together. So perhaps I think that I attribute my liking of them to her as an artist.
Thank you, Dr. Hunter. I appreciate that.
Thank
Some
you.
good points. And it's also important to note that the Inner Oracle self-discovery cards they're not tarot cards. They're for a different purpose. They're for inner discovery, and they're really based around metaphysical humanism. So for those out in the broadcast audience, you can pick up a deck of these. They're $30, a donation of $30. You can order them online. Go to metaphysicalhumanism.org/store, and you'll find them there.
If I can interrupt to say, I have used them with clients, so they are a good reading tool in counseling. I just want to add that.
And these cards, once we got them done, and I started using them a little bit. I mean, I've got some tarot cards, but I don't really use them regularly. These, when I started doing the spreads, after 2 or 3 or 4 spreads, I was amazed of the power of them, and that wasn't something I expected to see. I just wasn't expecting that. But it had its own thing. It had its own energy. It was very, very interesting, very intriguing. I've done spreads for folks too. And so to pick up on Dr. Hunter's idea, in fact, she was the one who suggested this, I have put a table, well, there was a table there, but I spread out the inner oracle cards over here. So what I'll do that every week. And when you come in, go over there and grab a card. But here's what you do. Take a moment, pause, reflect on your life, reflect on what's going on, reflect on maybe a question that you have, Remember, we're not directing this out to somewhere else. Remember, metaphysical humanism is about us. It's about accessing our higher self. So get that thought in mind, and then, pick a card. Whatever card you're drawn to, pick it out of the deck, look at it, note what it says, the description, as well as the card number. And then grab the little guidebook, turn to that page, whatever the card number is, and just read the short description. And let that be your thought for the day or for the week or whatever. And as Dr. Hunter said, you can go to our website, metaphysicalhumanism.org, and look over on the right-hand side, and every time you refresh the page, a new card will appear. So if you want to, the guidebook is not on there. So thank you, Dr. Hunter. Appreciate that. All right, next up on the program for the Exploring the Unknown segment, Grant Rubendunst is here as our guest speaker. He's going to be speaking on time slips. Grant Rubendunst is a licensed mental health counselor with the state of Florida. He's a graduate of the University of South Florida and holds an undergraduate degree in social work as well as a master's degree in rehabilitation and mental health counseling. Grant is also a certified leading paranormal investigator and the assistant director of Paranexus Anomalous Research Association. Grant has spent many years as a student and investigator of anomalous phenomena of all kinds, and we're happy and glad, as always, to have him back. So let's turn our attention to Grant Rubendunst.
Thank you, Dr. Kelley.
That's all right. You're all good.
Okay, very good. Let me get hooked up here. Okay, can everybody hear me all right? Yes. Okay, good. All right, Michael, I'm ready if you are. Okay, well, it's nice to see everybody here again. And this is like your 10-minute paranormal segment. So tonight what I thought we would do, excuse me, it's a little bit different, but it falls within our venue here. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about time slips, and this won't be a real lengthy presentation, but just basically to familiarize yourself with some of these concepts. What I would recommend, if this piques your interest, not only our folks here tonight with us at the church, but anybody out in the audience, if this piques your interest, you can just go into any search engine and punch in time slips and you'll find all kinds of information. I found that there was a great deal of time slip stories, and each one you have to kind of, decide for yourself which sounds more plausible to you. So, with that, let's just go ahead and move along to the first or the next slide, Michael. And these are just some visual presentations. I don't know if anybody in the audience is old enough to remember the ancient TV show called The Time Tunnel. That's a little cut from The Time Tunnel from like 1968. I was a high school senior then. Next slide, please. Okay, well, let's just talk a little bit about what a time slip is by definition. Time slip is a paranormal phenomenon in which a person or a group of people seem to either travel through a time via unknown means or appear to briefly enter into an alternative version of present reality via unknown means. As with other paranormal phenomena, the objective reality of such experiences is disputed by skeptics. Well, nothing new there. But one of the characteristics of the hallmark characteristics of a time slip is that people sometimes feel that they have just kind of stepped into a dimension or a overlap in dimensions where they experience things that seem to be out of sync with their present time. Okay? Simple as that. And of course, as we all know, anything paranormal is always going to be tossed up or going to be regarded by skeptics as questionable. Next slide, please. This is some of the famous cases. One of the most famous cases occurred in 1909 in Versailles. And at that time, there were a couple of British women that were over in Versailles, and they were visiting the grounds over there. And one of the other things that's characteristic of time slip experience is that all of a sudden they had feelings of like the atmosphere was oppressive, noises seemed to have been suppressed. It seemed to be a very kind of unusual environment. Well, to make a long story short, as these women wandered the grounds at Versailles, they bumped into people who seemed to be out of place in the way that they were dressed, the way they interacted, and the whole incident didn't take a lot of time, but it left these women very, very puzzled about what had occurred, and they were convinced to some degree that they had momentarily been transported into like a time frame around the time of the French Revolution. So that was one very famous case that happened in Versailles. And of course, Versailles, everybody knows, is a very beautiful place. Next slide, please. Here we go. This is kind of illustrates out of place things. There you have like a street scene from like the 1890s, maybe even earlier than that. And the top of the picture there is a great big old jet. So they're not compatible, but that's in essence what the time slip is all about. The non-compatibility. Two strange time periods that seem to be meshed. Next slide, please. Okay. We just talked about the Versailles, France case. The second one, this one has always interested me, and as a matter of fact, I think Twilight Zone many years ago did an episode that was based on this. A gentleman by the name of Sir Victor Goddard, who was an air marshal. He was a hero during World War I as an aviator. And before the end of the World War I, he was flying one of the old Fokkers and got lost and disorientated in a cloud bank, I believe. And when the clouds cleared, he flew over an airfield that wasn't too far from where he was supposed to be. And much to his amazement, he saw monoplanes there on the field, which were not to have been invented until probably 20 or 30 years later. Okay? So he was so moved by that, and he was so impressed by the whole incident that he really felt quite seriously that he had gotten a glimpse of history. And once again, compatible with all the other types of events that occurred, he felt an oppressive environment. He felt that the time kind of slowed down, sounds were suppressed, things were very, very different during the time that he actually experienced the slip. Another real interesting case occurred in 1950 in Scotland. In the year 1865, there was a pretty brutal battle that was fought in this area of Scotland. It was called Nectan Smear in 685 AD. Well, a woman who was at a party that was, apparently this place is out on the moors, or close to the moors, I guess, and she was driving home, her car broke down. So she knew that a little bit up the road there was a place where she could make a telephone call, get some assistance, and as she was walking down the road, she happened to look off to her right into the vacant fields and saw lights bobbing out in the field, which was really kind of bizarre and strange, and she swore to herself that she could see people, figures out there, like they were looking over the field of bodies to see if they could find their loved ones. And the people would bend and stoop, bring their torches down to the ground and look at a person and meander on. Well, of course, this was a little unsettling to her. And she came back and reported it. And of course, I think another person might have experienced something in the same proximity, maybe within 2 or 3 days later. But that was one that made a lot of headlines. That was in the 1950s. Another interesting one that occurred was in 1957. Most of these happened in England, although several of the other ones have happened in France and other places throughout the world. But in this particular case, there were 3 naval cadets, British naval cadets, that went to a small town in a rural part of England. And when they got to the town, before they walked into the town, they felt, some of the issues that we had discussed before. They felt kind of an overpowering feeling of oppression, that sounds changed, the birds stopped singing. Things just seemed kind of odd. And as they walked through the town was largely abandoned. But once again, this is in the 1950s, and they went up to a shop, and inside the shop they saw the carcass of an ox there. That was, back in the old days, used to hang meat up to kind of ripen for a few days. And they knew, even as young cadets, that the British public health system would probably frown on something like that. And as they looked through the windows of various other shops, they were covered with mold and a few other things. So it was a very bizarre sort of thing where the town was very quiet, nobody else was in the town, and then towards the end, they just kind of took off, and by the time they had got maybe a mile out of town, the town seemed to, they heard the church bells, they heard a number of other things. So these are just some interesting illustrations. Okay, Mike, if you could go ahead and give me the next one. We've kind of touched on this, but I'll go over it briefly. Remember that when people experience these time slips, they have feelings that sound and light are distorted. Sometimes they have feelings of depression or feeling that the environment is very oppressive, which sometimes comes about in hauntings. There's a similarity there for some folks. Feeling like the unfolding situation is unreal. In the psychological community, we call that disassociation. Sometimes you see that with children that have been sexually abused. They disassociate themselves to get away of a situation that's way too painful. They also feel like objects in the environment have completely changed or once again distorted. I think depending on the person, there's distortions in perception. Also, along with these feelings of apprehension about the whole experience, there's also sometimes a feeling of calmness and peace. All right, next slide, please. Okay, well, when it comes down to hypotheses here and conclusions, these are just a couple of possible. Time slips seem to occur, but they, as we become more aware of how complex our universe is, we have to take into consideration the concept that time's not linear, that time may fold back on over itself, or whatever type of situations environmentally may create these type of overlapping type of dimensions or situations where actually time seems to, two different times seem to occur at the same place. Okay? And of course, the real question, I suppose, here, and where the skeptics are going to chime in the most, is are these events actual events that are occurring, or are they psychological? And there's the rub. I think the best thing you can do is, if you find time slips interesting, is to just kind of dig into it yourselves, look around, take into consideration the fact that as our physics change and our concepts of cosmology change, that some of these things that have seemed so far out and so unbelievably out there on the fringe may in reality actually occur from time to time when certain elements within our universe or multiverse are right for it to occur. So with that, I want to thank you for your time, and thanks for everybody out there in the audience listening to me, and for all the students and everybody else. And I'll turn it over back to Dr. Kelley. And just to touch on one thing that Dr. Kelley and Dr. Hunter said, is remember this, there's one thing that all successful people fear the very most, and that's failure. Okay? Thank you.
Any questions for Grant?
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, you betcha.
Grant, thank you very much. Time slips are a fascinating thing. You can get books on them, and there's some compelling stories. It's hard to know what is real at times, but there's some interesting stories with that. Okay, let's do some announcements. I want to try to make up something that should have been mentioned 2 weeks ago or so when Dr. Brian Parsons was on our program talking about cryptozoology. I had intended to mention his newer book, and I blew by it that week, and then I blew by it last week. So tonight I'm not blowing by it. His book is called The Handbook for the Amateur Cryptozoologist, and you can obtain this book at his website, briandparsons.com. That's Handbook for the Amateur Cryptozoologist, and you can get it at briandparsons.com. Also want to mention, for the benefit of our members, students, members, any member of any one of our programs, that includes obviously ICMH, the International Church of Metaphysical Humanism, Metaphysics Institute, International College of Metaphysical Humanism, Humanistic Science rather, ICHS, EmpoweredRecovery.com, Paranexus, any of our programs, if you're a member of those, you are eligible to join our One Planet community. It's a Facebook-like page, website. It's One Planet. It's oneplanetcommunity.com. You'd think I'd know it. I created it. oneplanetcommunity.com. And the one is spelled out, O-N-E, not the number one. Anyway, there's a little sidebars, a little block graphics on our website so you can do that. So we'd like to invite you. It's a closed system. It's only for our own folks, and we have about 120 people registered on there now. So you can share pictures. You can, if you're a student, you can ask questions. You can ask other students. You can interact with other students. It's a great way to come together and be a network. That's why it's called oneplanetcommunity.com. All right. Want to also, as always, thank everyone for previous donations from previous weeks. We appreciate that. It helps us keep the flame burning and things going. And I want to let our broadcast viewers know that there is a link if you'd like to make a donation toward our work. We appreciate it. It goes to helping a lot of things. We have hardship scholarships that we offer to students who can't afford the tuition, so it helps with that. It helps with everything we do, so we appreciate that. All right, the last thing on the agenda then is to do our soul light meditation. So let's get into a comfortable place, and I want you to pick a spot straight across from you, stare at it, focus on it, take a deep breath in through your nose, hold on to it to the mental count of 3, and just release it slowly through your mouth and relax. It's all right. Feels so good to relax for a time. We need to do it more. This is almost like a little micro meditation of sorts. You can do it any time of the day. Take another deep breath in through your nose. Hold on to it to the mental count of 3. Release it slowly through your mouth and allow your eyes to gently close while you just settle. Just settle. It's all right. For the next few moments, it's your time. Nobody wants anything from you. No demands. Everything is just about you. I want you to visualize that beautiful globe or ball of light. It represents your higher self, and it resides just above your head. See it in your mind's eye. Focus on it. See how it connects with everything else that's out there. You are a powerful being. You have all the power you need within you to do whatever you want. I want you to see that ball of energy, that glowing, beautiful, bright white ball, and I want you to bring it on down into the center of your very being. And just feel the energy. Feel it. And visualize that energy filling up your entire being, your entire body. And as that energy fills you up, you understand some things. You understand that this energy is nurturing, relaxing, healing, heals every cell of your body. It revitalizes your body. And you also realize some other things. You realize that you have everything within you to accomplish anything you want. You realize that fear is just an illusion. It will not hold you back unless you let it, but you won't let it. Taking another deep breath, focusing on the rhythm of your breathing, you understand that you are enough. That you are entitled to all the good things in life, the same as anyone else, no more, no less. You are entitled to success. You are entitled to walk your path and live your dream. It is for you and you alone. If you don't live your dream will not be lived. Because only you can live your dream. Taking another deep breath, relaxing, feel that energy within you. Feel it vibrating. Feel it releasing all of its nurturing, healing effects on your very soul. Now, as you understand that this vibrant, powerful force that was within you, as it unfolds within your life, you can go out and happen to life. You can accomplish anything. And this is an attitude, a new attitude perhaps. But it's one that you take with you from this moment forward. And any time you forget that you are a powerful being and can do anything you choose, you remember the soul light that is within you, your higher self, your ultimate power. It makes it just fine. And you can bring this down within you at all times, and it's always there for you. Now, as I begin to count from 1 to 3, you begin to breathe more normally. You see your soul light reclaiming its position right above your head. 2, feeling very, very refreshed. 3, eyes open wide, feeling relaxed, yes, but revitalized, energized, and you're back. Don't forget, the future is in your hand. You can do anything you want. It's entirely up to you. Folks, we appreciate your time and attention tonight. Appreciate all those who have joined us on the live broadcast. We appreciate those who are joining us on the archive. We hope that you'll return next week for our live broadcast on Tuesdays at 7:30 Eastern, right here at metaphysicalhumanism.org. If you go there, you'll find the live broadcast page. Appreciate, again, everything. Look forward to seeing you next week. Until next week, remember to listen, think, learn, grow, and live.